Welcome to Chapter 4 of Basics. This chapter will be broken into two sections. The first section is about the timeline, and the second about the shelf. Let's just grab the timeline. As you can see, the timeline has a couple of different icons. And on the left-hand side here, we have our record button and our playback. And beside our record button, we have real-time animation switch and keyframe switch. On the top left, we have our camera switcher, where we can switch between different camera angles and cameras. And on the right-hand side here, we have export. This is our timeline. So as we drag along our timeline, we can scrub through different keyframes, as well as change the range or sequence of each camera. This is very important when exporting scenes and animations because we can choose how long this camera sequence goes for. If our camera sequence is this long, we can choose export and just that amount of the animation will be exported, whether it's video, 360 video, animation, or just a photo. This here is our range duration, so we can change our duration of our whole animation by just sliding this down. Let's say something like 5 seconds. Let's give you a quick tip about the cameras. With each camera, they have a context menu. If we hold down our check mark, we can change this camera to a 360 camera, or hold it back down and change it to a regular camera. Same thing can happen with a normal 360 camera. We can change this camera to a regular camera or change it back. Awesome. Next, we'll talk about the shelf. Welcome to section 2 of chapter 4, Basics. Let's grab the shelf out here. We'll just move these cameras over to the side. So the first icon on our shelf is import. This is our import directory into Tvori. We can drag assets from this directory into Tvori. Things like photos, videos, and assets, as well as sound. Next one is Google Poly. We can directly import assets from Google Poly into Tvori. We'll just grab this one. Great, I'll just close that shelf and snap this model just to the center. As you notice, when we get close to this object, it will start to turn blue. So it's a little bit difficult to see what's going on and maybe block out shots or have a look at the object itself. So we can just freeze it by using the locker tool. Great, now it's frozen. Beautiful model, isn't it? Wow. How cool is that? We do a whole story in here. So that's just importing models from Google Poly straight into Tvori. I'm just going to unlock that object and delete it. The next part is our packs. And in our packs, we have a range of different packs in Tvori. And the first one we'll talk about is primitives. These are just primitives, allow you to build scenes and build environments really quickly and use basic primitives to make complex objects. Next is environments. We have trees and rocks and mountains. The solar system, where we can bring out different planets, buildings, accessories for characters. We can attach these accessories to characters. A New York scene where we can build a city scene, London scene, and vehicles. The next tab is characters. So this is where your puppets are in Tvori, and they're really, really powerful. Beautiful animations with these puppets. They're really a dynamic style of puppet. I'm just going to change the sun here so we can see a little bit better. I'm going to add a light here. And go back to characters and just pull out the default puppet. Delete this cube and drag this puppet into the center of the scene. Okay. It just allows us to see the extra parts of the puppet. So this is your puppet in Tvori. There's a lot of different features these puppets have, and they can get very complex very quickly. So to try to simplify it for you, I'll just show you a little bit about what this puppet is and some of the features it has. But I'm not going to go into too much depth because they are really complex. So first of all, you can see we have different control areas or zones, and on the puppet itself, they're highlighted in blue, where we can pick those parts up, like that, and move the puppet into position. Move the head and the hips, as well as the elbow controllers. You can change the elbows. As you notice this blue orb here, this is another way of selecting the puppet. And above that is a setup animation mods, which unlocks and locks the puppet. Under that is a control panel. This is a new addition to Tvori. This allows us to have knee controls and turn off our elbow controls, or both. We can unlock and lock the puppet here as well. Reset to T-pose. We can change the proportions of the bones, mirror those changes, as well as go back, undo default proportions, copy bone and paste bone proportions. So this stuff is a little bit complex to go through in basics, but just to give you an idea of what it is and where it is. I'll just lock that puppet. Okay, next is lighting. So we're just going to grab a spotlight and a point light and just delete the earlier point light we had. So to go in depth about lighting, first of all, we'll have a look at the spotlight. The spotlight is really powerful. If we look at the spotlight here, we can see that it has a couple of different options on the spotlight. First is this slider here. We can slide the barn doors of the spotlight smaller and bigger. And at the top here, we have a color wheel where we can change the color of the spotlight and the value or intensity of that light. With the point light, it's basically a scale. How big the point light is can affect the intensity and how close these lights are. It also has a color wheel on the front of the light bulb, just here. Let's make this a bit bigger. We can change the intensity of that point light as well, and the color. Great, so that's lighting. And at the back of this panel here, we have environments, sort of like environment presets. We can change it to like black and white or dark scene. This is more like a moonlit scene. And back to a default day scene. Let's turn that back down. Make it a bit smaller. Brings us to our next tab, which is the effects panel. And there's some really great effects in here. You've got magic, and you've got fire, and you've got snow, and you've got fog. Fog can be affected by each of those effects. And last is your fan. Fire can blow the fire away, and the snow can be blown away as well as the magic. The scale of this fan, if you make it bigger, it blows it further away, or you make the fan smaller, you can have really, really subtle effects. That's the fan. Great, so that's the end of chapter 4 of basics, and we covered the timeline and the shelf. Awesome.